faith communities love to celebrate. But what if our celebration causes pain and hurt for those who are members of the community? On Austin Faith Dialogue, we're going to talk about how we can take a celebration and minister to the wholeness of that celebration. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Carl Gronberg, host of the program, and we're going to talk about one of those celebrations of our culture, of our society, that impacts the community of faith, and that celebration is Mother's Day. And what about those within the community who struggle when it comes to the time of Mother's Day? We have some suggestions for you, and with us today on the program are Willin Wall. Willin, welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue.
Thank you.
And Pastor Greg McDonald. Pastor, welcome. Thank you both.
Carl. Nice to
I understand you've been on the program before.
I have, yes.
Glad to have you back. Thank you for your ministry and presence in our community. We're grateful. You're both a part of the community known as Central Presbyterian, and you brought with you an idea when you became pastor there of Mother's Day and what can be done with Mother's Day. Now, most of us think of Mother's Day as a time to celebrate and rejoice, but there's another side to Mother's Day. Talk to us about that.
Sure. It certainly is a day to celebrate and rejoice. It's a time for us to remember those who have birthed us and nurtured us. But over 20 years in the ministry, I've discovered that it's a day filled with pain and grief and suffering. On the one hand, we want to celebrate, but we also want to be a community that ministers to all of God's people. And so on this day, we've developed a service that is an alternative service on Mother's Day evening at 7 o'clock, a service of healing and wholeness, where those who find this day difficult can come together, share their pain, to name their pain, and to take that next step to wholeness and healing.
Well, Lynn, what do you some of the issues as a part of the leadership of this community of faith? What are some of the issues that people bring to Mother's Day? Now, as your pastors probably told you that when I was in seminary, they told us not to celebrate Mother's Day, that it's not a liturgical day, it's not in the church calendar. It is a cultural event, and many people gear up, and lots of cards are sold, and flowers, and all that kind of thing. But there is that reality of the downside of it. And what are some of those issues that people are dealing with when Mother's Day rolls around?
Well, I think that there are issues of not having been a mother, not being able to be a mother. There are issues of losing your mother, of being abused by your mother, of abusing your mother. All of these are issues that the mere presence of a Mother's Day celebration might create in us a new pain.
I asked you to tell a story, and whether you'd be comfortable telling that story, a personal story about your experience with Mother's Day. Now, I understand that you lost your mother at a very early age, is that correct?
I was a very young girl when I lost my mother. I lost both of my parents when I was very young. And for years, I carried that loneliness with me. As I became an adult, I then learned that I was not able to be a mother. And so Mother's Day always was a time for me, too, that I just had to kind of just push on through. I have a very vivid memory of a time when the church that I was attending at that time, very joyously was going to hand out flowers to mothers during service that day. And when I walked into service that day, the usher handed me a flower and then for the first time saw me and knew my circumstances and said to me, "Oh, well, you can have one anyway." And I remembered how singled out and left out I felt.
Crushed by an usher that didn't know what to say.
Very well meaning, but it still was
Pastor,
there.
how about that? You heard Willian's story, and as her pastor, you've heard the story before, so you know it. But that's a very touching story and one of pain. What brought you to recognize this other side of Mother's Day? You've been a pastor for 20 years, I understand?
Yes.
When you came to Austin, you approached your leadership at Central Presbyterian and said, "This is what I'm sensing."
Yes. I've been wanting to do this for years, and when I became pastor at Central Presbyterian, I'd go to our worship committee in session, excuse me, and say, on Mother's Day, there's something I've noticed over the years. One, that many of our family don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I've asked the question why, and I've gone to some of those people and spoken with them about they are regular worshipers, but on this day they're not there. And they would tell me stories that simply would break your heart of losing a child in childbirth or a death of a young person in their life. Men as well as women come to these services because they too have great grief. And there's such a bond between all of us and our mothers at some level that is just part of who we are. And so it has been a passion of mine to do this. And so this is the 4th year. We will be holding our service of healing and wholeness on Sunday evening of Mother's Day.
It seems to me that whole idea of being inclusive and sensitive to people's feelings is one of the great goals and responsibility of a faith community. And to recognize that here we have this very cultural event of Mother's Day on the calendar in springtime, and yet there is this reality that Willian, you talked about. As you were growing into being a woman and being married, you were part of a faith community? Is that, you'd always been a part of a faith community?
Yes.
And
yes, I have.
had it ever struck you as being inappropriate, possibly, that this was going on within the congregations where you belonged? Was it a revelation to you when Pastor came and said, "Let's do this," or did you say, "Hey, I was there a long time ago, I just needed someone to say this to me"?
I remember when Greg came to the session meeting and spoke of this, that I thought, oh yes, it was in a way a revelation. Oh yes, we do need to do this. Through my years of being part of a faith community, I have found ways to express that pain and have found comfort in that pain through prayer and my understanding that God is always with me.
Might I add this whole idea of sensitivity? When we talked about that, it's like anything else. Once you've had an experience, you become sensitive to those who share that kind of experience. And so when we talked about that around the session, it was like light bulbs went off. Aha, sure, that's going on. Well-meaning folks just had not connected to that kind of pain because so many of them had experienced it, and that's understandable. But once they heard that, it was like, sure, absolutely, we know that's out there.
That gives me a great deal of hope for the faith communities and your congregation particularly, because it says that there are people in your leadership, and those who are watching Austin Faith Dialogue are people of faith, some within congregations and maybe some outside of congregations because of things like this. You're not saying that we should not celebrate motherhood. Is that right? You're not saying that there should not be for those who want and choose in the worship leadership of communities of faith, if they want to have a Mother's Day celebration, you're not saying, no, give that up. That's not what I hear you saying.
Absolutely not. We need to celebrate that. We're all God's children, and our mothers are very important to us. I'm not saying we should not do that. I don't want any faith community to understand we're saying that. But I am saying let's raise that level of sensitivity to those who are really suffering on this particular day of celebration.
No, what I understand is that you actually then offer 2 services. You have your regular service, worship service in the morning, and then you have this other service. We're going to talk about that in the second half of the program. But in the morning, then, would you be singing hymns that are reflective of that, or would you kind of not go into the Mother's Day observance?
we do not go into the Mother's Day observance full force. We recognize that's the day and it's mentioned, but we are still think it's our responsibility to raise the level of sensitivity among all of us about this day. So on the one hand, we have this time in our service where we share joys and concerns in our prayers of the people. So it's a perfect time to share in prayer the joy of this day, and yet at the same time the concern we have for those who have a hard time joining us in that
So
celebration.
what I hear you saying is that you're not handing out red and white carnations. Is that right?
That's correct.
You're not doing that type
Not
of
doing
thing.
that, no.
And yet you are, in your joys and concerns, lifting up the importance of being mothers and thanking mothers and expressing thanks to God for those who raised us and nurtured us.
Indeed.
What else would it be appropriate for a faith community to do, do you think, from your point as a pastor and as a leader, to integrate that whole concept of Mother's Day? If they wanted to have one service and not two, but have one service, how could they do that? Because you are then going to talk about what you've done with your second service, but what are some possibilities for pastors and worship leaders, do you think, from your experience, to maybe bring these together in one time, in one setting?
Yes, I think that's clearly possible. There's certainly scripture that can focus that day down, that speaks about our Lord's mercy and grace and His own love for His mother and the connection Mary had with our Lord, and at the same time the great pain of other mothers that came to Jesus for healing, who understood that their child was dying and needed the healing touch of our Lord.
One of the things that comes to my mind is to hold up the universal idea and concept of motherhood, and to involve people who are not necessarily biologically or adoptive mothers, to hold up the idea of the parental nurturing that can go on. What do you think of that idea?
In my experiences, I've learned to live without the particular label of being a birth mother or an adoptive mother. I have come to understand that there is still a place for me to nurture others. And I have,
like that, Lynn.
I have experience right now of being a mentor to young people. Have taught Sunday school.
Talking about social parenting?
Well,
In a
I'll tell
way.
you what we're going to do. This is good stuff, and we're going to continue this, and we hope that you'll stay with us in Awesome Faith Dialogue as we talk about the joys of Mother's Day, but also about the pain, the grief, and the healing that one particular congregation in the Austin community is about. Please stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue. Okay, that will do, Craig. Welcome back to Awesome Faith Dialogue. We're talking about celebrations, and within every faith community there are always these struggles and how that we can be inclusive and bring all people into it out of the context of their life experience. And that's very exciting for worship leaders like myself and like Greg McDonald of Central Presbyterian, and this worship leader that you have, Willin Wall. Thank you for being an Awesome Faith Dialogue and being a second part of this program, because in the first part, you helped us recognize that the Mother's Day, a cultural celebration, has lots of good in it. The idea and concept can be very good. but there can also be some pain connected with it. And I suggested to you that one of the things that I've tried to do as a worship leader is to broaden that whole idea of mother, and to be able to suggest that there are other ways that we can do that nurturing that even transcend biology and adoption, and that we can share our maleness or our femaleness, that gender reality, in a variety of settings. And certainly the faith community does that. And you mentioned, Willin, as we had to break for the mid-time there on that commercial that we do in Austin Faith Dialogue, you mentioned that you did some mentoring, or do some mentoring?
I do some mentoring. My husband and I, for many years, have chosen to host exchange students.
Ah, beautiful. That's exciting, isn't it?
It's fun.
We've had exchange students on this program.
It's fun and exciting.
Yeah.
Sunday school teaching. Central Presbyterian has a program going that I think is just wonderful. It's Adopt-A-Buddy, where an adult member of our faith community pairs up with a younger member of our faith community and just forms the relationship and the bond, the friendship. And in that way, I can't tell you the joy that I personally feel when I walk into the church and children come to me, running to me to hug me.
Exactly.
That's the healing that is the other side of this story.
And to reach that point of healing, one must be about initiating some of that through programs in the community, but also personally have the initiative to be about some of that. But the reality is, Pastor, there are some who have a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, and you mentioned that in your years of ministry. So you developed, and you're the genius behind all this. You're the mother behind this, all right?
I gave birth to it, that's right.
And we want to give you the credit for that. Tell us about this liturgy. Now, it's not the morning liturgy. You have a morning worship service in your congregation, but this is an evening liturgy. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is an evening liturgy at our church at 7 o'clock. And it is really a time of meditation, prayer.
Okay, tell us, if I come, and people from the community at large are invited. Those
Absolutely.
who are viewing Austin Faith Dialogue can come in. They don't have to be Presbyterians, right? You don't
Absolutely
check their
not.
card when they come in or anything like that, all right?
Absolutely
They don't
not.
even have to be members of Central, okay? They could be atheists, agnostics, and you might even let a few Lutherans in, possibly.
We
Is that
might.
okay?
We might.
You have some questions about that. But as I understand, you were raised Roman Catholic, so certainly you would let some Roman Catholics in, right?
Well, if they've gone to confession. we might.
Right. So they come in. I come to your church, and the door is open on Mother's Day evening. And I walk in there. What am I going to experience? Is there going to be music? What's going to happen?
There will be some beautiful music. There will be a setting that hopefully will be welcoming and warm.
Will there be ushers there?
There will be friends to welcome you into our church. The main thing that we try to make happen that night is that folks could come and understand that they are not alone in their pain, that they're not isolated in their pain. There are others just like them in our city who are suffering and hurting. I think that in itself is healing. Those who have the courage to even come out that night. And it takes great courage for many folks to take that step, to come to a service like this. Many have been wanting to, but they're afraid. And I think what they'll find is a place where they can, in confidence, and share with others their hurt. Perhaps for the first time, get in touch with and name the pain that's plagued them for many years.
You mentioned some of that pain being the loss of a mother at early age, possibly not conceiving a child or not adopting a child, abuse, parental abuse,
Yes.
abuse by a mother, or possibly abuse of a mother, right? All of those realities, maybe child-mother lack of communication, maybe anger.
Absolutely.
Are those some of those things?
Well, it runs the gamut from folks who have felt psychologically abandoned to physically abandoned.
Anger?
Anger. I remember last year a young couple that came forward to pray with me and the partner that was with me and to anoint them. They had just learned that very morning, this was a young couple, just learned that very morning they could not have children. As they came forward, she tried to voice that. And she couldn't voice it. She just couldn't say it with her lips. And her loving husband was beside her. He was able to share their pain, and we were able to pray together. That's the kind of things that happen. But it runs. I was just absolutely honored to have these strangers come and share with me, ask me to pray with them over the most difficult moments in their lives.
But Pastor, it seems to me that what those who came really sensed a welcome from your community of faith to say we are all family, and that when you have pain, we walk beside you, or in your case, kneel beside you. You mentioned something about maybe for those viewing Austin Faith Dialogue, they might say, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on with this oil stuff? What are you talking about?
We hold to that scriptural passage where elders are invited to go out to those who are ill and to lay hands on them and anoint them, to pray with them. And so we invite folks to come forward for prayer and or anointment. It's totally up to them, or not to come forward. They're free to do that. But a time to share the pain they're having and to pray together about that and ask God to give them what they need, the resources to take that step.
Willin, have you noticed what's going on here? Two clergy are just dominating all this. Jump in here, Willin, all right?
Yes.
Come on.
I was going to say that the first year that I went to this, I was content enough to just sit there and have a place that was welcoming, to let me just face the issues that I had. And so I wanted to point out to people who might be considering coming that evening that you aren't going to be required to get up and state whatever issue it is that is in your life. But come and rest with God.
And come and experience that process of acknowledgement and naming, as you said, Pastor, but also that hope of wholeness and healing. Now, you said something, Willin. You said, issues I had. Now, are those issues in the past tense? I had those issues of losing mother early on, as you shared with us and our viewing audience, the issue of not having a child of your own. Are those issues in the past, or are those issues that you continue to deal with and seek healing and wholeness for?
I think that the answer to that for me is partially yes, they're in the past. But I do still continue to deal with my not being a mother. I now give great thanks for the time that I was able to spend with my own mother, and give thanks for her life. It does not carry the day-to-day pain that it used to. I'm not there yet with issues of my own motherhood.
Thanks for that kind of honesty, because there will be people watching this program, Willin, who you will touch by saying that, who are dealing. I think so much of our identity is wrapped up in those kinds of issues. For being a dad or being a mom or our work or those kinds of things that...
Every single day in my workplace, I hear other people, not just women, men and women, talking about their nuclear families. And I don't have stories to tell.
Yes.
And I know that there are other people like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Pastor, what does that say to you?
What it says to me is, and I hope the folks that are listening, oftentimes when we're in pain, there will be those who say, just look around you, there's so much suffering in the world, and get a hold of yourself. And my response to that is, what you really need to get a hold of is the resources that are out there to help you. This is only one, of course. There are many, many more resources out there to help us with our pain and our grief and our loss. And so I want to say to those who are out there who hear that sort of thing, just don't listen to it and be wise enough to seek the help that's out there for us.
You are not going to be one of Job's advisors then, is what you're saying to
Absolutely
me, right?
not.
But I think
Absolutely
what you
not.
are saying is to Willin, member of your community, and to others who are viewing this program, you're saying not only look out there for resources, but I hear you also saying is look inside yourself for resources. Because it has to do something with self-love. And it comes to realizing that we have to be reconciled to ourselves the way we are, and not have all of these visions of who maybe our mothers were or were not, or who we are or are not.
Exactly.
How does that identify with you? Are you more than a woman who doesn't have a child?
Much more. I am a loved child of God,
Mm-hmm.
and we all are. And I have a certain history, and I have a whole basket full of blessings and gifts. And I walk each day with those things, though, and I really hear every day that what I am to do is to rejoice in the life that I have. And you know, I guess my biggest joy is to come to a place and realize that my family is not just mother, father, sister, brother,
Amen.
but everybody.
Well then, thanks. You've really shared a lot in this program of Austin Faith Dialogue, and thank you for opening up your heart to us and participating. And Pastor, once again, where will the service be held? What day?
It will be held Mother's Day, May the 13th at 7 o'clock at Central Presbyterian Church in the corner of 8th and Brazos.
And who's invited?
Everyone's invited that could benefit from this gathering. I want to say thank you to Austin Faith Dialogues and to this TV station for bringing this kind of programming to our city.
You're one neat guy. We'll invite you back. And we hope that all of you who are watching this program will stay with us and continue to learn and grow in your faith walk. That in the midst of our celebrations, culturally and religiously, there is the presence of the one who brings hope and healing and renewed life to you and to those you love. Thank you for watching Austin Faith Dialogue.